We're joined by Ben Judah, writer, political commentator and former Foreign Office Special Advisor to David Lammy, and Sir Michael Fabricant, political commentator, former chairman of the Conservative Friends of America and, of course, former Conservative MP. Let me start with you, Michael. What do you think of this ruckus?
Well, certainly there's no way that Keir Starmer is anything like Winston Churchill. I remember a quote, actually, from Winston Churchill, which I read, which said that you cannot appease your enemy, because if you do that, you only make them stronger. So that begs the question, is Iran our enemy? Well, MI5 have just released the fact that some 20 terror attacks were foiled by MI5, all of which were sponsored by Iran and their proxies. So they're certainly no friends of ours. And, you know, I live in Lichfield, although, by the way, I'm speaking to you from Wales at the moment. Definitely can confirm that there are very different accents throughout Wales, but that's another thing that you'll be dealing with later. But in Lichfield, nearby, we have the National Memorial Arboretum, where they list all the people who have been killed in the services since the Second World War. And in recent years, many of them were killed by Iran's proxies in Afghanistan and Iraq, with people trained in Iran how to make IEDs and other explosive devices. So Iran is no friend of ours, that's for sure. And I'll say one more thing if we have the time.
Right. And that's fine. I'll come back to you in a second. But Ben Judah, the irresistible logic of what Michael says surely is that if the moment comes to hit Iran, we have to be there with the US, our finest ally.
Can we just get real here? I wouldn't assemble an IKEA flat pack without a plan, let alone invade Iran without a plan. The Prime Minister is absolutely right to be clear that we cannot participate in a war of choice we had no planning involvement in, and which has had at least 3 different justifications in the last 72 hours. Is it about regime change? Is it about seeking a deal with the IRGC? Or is it about imploding Iran completely? Not clear.
Well, on day one, they dropped enough bombs on the presidential leadership building to kill not just the Ayatollah, but 47 of his close aides. Would we not have supported that action?
Let's be clear, you cannot jump into an invasion, into a war in the Middle East without a plan, unless you're going to go against everything we have learned in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan, unless you're going against everything you know about the world. What would you do without a plan? There are very few things you wouldn't do without a plan that are serious. The idea that we should jump into a war simply because of emotion, that is absolutely wrong.
Michael,
absolutely right.
That essentially, Michael, is the course of action you're recommending. Just simply leap and look afterwards.
Well, Ben keeps talking about an invasion. Ben's an intelligent guy. He worked for the Atlanticists. He went to Christ College, Oxford. He knows there's been no discussion about any invasion whatsoever. This is nothing like Iraq. This is nothing like Afghanistan. Certainly, there's been debate about exactly what the objectives are. And it's very interesting that at the moment, the Americans have been arming the Kurds. So maybe in Iran, maybe they will do the insurrection. We don't know.
But that's all. That's exactly
a question of invasion.
Yeah, but
and
Ben,
to say that the United Kingdom should just hold our noses when Iran has, as I said earlier on, been a major enemy of the UK, killing British armed forces and planning 20 different terrorist plots here within the UK is ridiculous.
But on that basis, Michael, we'd invade Russia as well, wouldn't we? Or we'd try and knock out the Kremlin, because they did the famous Novichok poisoning in Salisbury. So that's not quite enough to justify it.
Well, I suppose the argument goes that whereas the Iranians, this is what the Russians would say, whereas the Iranians were planning terrorist attack that would affect the general public, while I'm not condoning the Novichok attack, this was an ex-KGB agent who had been told by MI5 to live in secrecy, something he didn't do. Now, that's no defense of Russia, but a very, very different case from 20 different terror attacks, which would have involved ordinary people being killed here in the United Kingdom.
Ben, back to you.
Donald Trump explicitly refused to rule out boots on the ground. That's why I was saying that when it's not clear what he wants to do. Does he want to invade? Does he want to implode the regime? Does he want to do a deal with the IRGC? We've seen Bush administration rhetoric from him on day one, followed up by ideas he wants it to be a bit like Venezuela, doing a deal with that components of that truly repressive regime. Now, as you know, Michael really correctly said, he's talking to the Kurds, indicating he might want to carve up Iran. There's no plan. It's completely unclear what he's trying to do or what he's planning, which is why the UK can't participate in something like this.
I suppose, Michael, the nearest we've got to it is Libya, where we did try to just do things from the air. We succeeded in knocking out Gaddafi, who was then killed by his own people. But my God, that country now it's in a horrific state.
Well, it's not. It has actually calmed down quite a bit in Libya. But I agree with you. You know, there has to be a plan and there has to be a way of achieving it. And there is an argument. Can you have regime change via the air? We'll find out in due course, no doubt. But was it right for Starmer to say, no, we're not going to help the United States, and then 2 days later, for all sorts of other reasons, say we are, and also pinning all his hopes on international law? I mean, can you imagine Churchill in the Second World War saying, well, the Battle of Britain will result in German pilots being shot down. This isn't necessarily going to be within international law. You know, this is not the way to behave. This is not the way other prime ministers have behaved. And the problem is with Keir Starmer, and we see it time and time again, not just the U-turns, but also his obsession with the minutiae, whether it be points of law or anything else. He can't seem to see the big picture. And I'll tell you, the big picture is that the United Kingdom and the United States, and Ben knows this as well as I, are very, very much working together on intelligence. I visited some while ago the United States Embassy and was shocked in a good way to see almost an entire floor of the US Embassy in London occupied by special branch police from the Met, from MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. And you know what? At the British Embassy in Washington, there's a similar arrangement. No other two countries have that arrangement. Now, I'm not saying we should have gone in there with British aircraft or anything else, but the big picture is that the United States, I think, is right in what it's doing. And for Keir Starmer to retreat into international law as an excuse for not helping our best ally is dangerous in the extreme. Will they help us next time if we need help from them?
Purely for practical reasons, Ben, shouldn't we have just gone in one day earlier at the beginning? Because look at what's happened to Spain, where Trump has said the USA will no longer trade with Spain because they've been disapproving of this thing.
I mean, I agree with Michael that we shouldn't be sending British troops into a war when we don't know if it's an invasion, a carve-up, or an attempt to topple the regime from the air. We just don't know. British soldiers and British troops deserve better than that. That is the lesson of Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. We have a special bond with the United States. It's between people, it's between companies, and there is a special system that's built up that Michael, correctly referenced that works. There's work we do on intelligence together that's incredibly impressive, and we need to be much more confident in that, confident in the bond between nations, and not feel panicked that all of these ties are going to unravel if we don't follow an extremely erratic American president into an unclear and unpopular campaign from the air. Look, we had 1776. We didn't participate in the war in Vietnam. Nobody even remembers Harold Wilson saying no to Lyndon B. Johnson. Let's have a bit of confidence in British and American people and those British and American systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Ben Judah, writer and political commentator, and Sir Michael Fabricant,